Welcome to Tabitha Revenge Stories, where every twist keeps you on the edge of your seat. If you love thrilling revenge tales, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, so you never miss a new story. The anniversary dinner was packed. Family, friends, business associates. Everyone my father wanted to impress. My father, Victor, stood up with his glass raised. The room quieted. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, his speech. "I want to talk about my son, Noah," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "He's always been, well, let's be honest. He's dead weight. He's never contributed anything meaningful. While his sibling has built something real, Noah has been hanging on, taking up space." The room filled with laughter. Some of it nervous. Some of it real. Like they believed him. I sat there, feeling my jaw tighten. And then something shifted inside me. Instead of defending myself, instead of getting angry, I just nodded. "You're right, Dad," I said calmly. Everyone turned to look at me. "Go on. I'd like to hear more." The words hung in the air. The tone of my voice had been completely different from what anyone expected. Not angry. Not sad. Almost inviting. My father, encouraged by my response, kept going. He listed my failures. My lack of ambition. My inability to achieve. He praised my siblings' accomplishments while dismissing every choice I'd made. The whole time he talked, I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I let every word land exactly where he threw it. I just sat there, calm. Listening. Waiting. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Something about my silence felt wrong to them. Like they expected me to react, and my refusal to react was somehow worse. My father's confidence started wavering. He wasn't getting the reaction he wanted. Instead of backing down though, he doubled down. "Never supported this family," he said. "Never been reliable. Never contributed." And I just nodded. Like he was making excellent points. I raised my drink and took a calm sip. The room watched me like I might explode at any second. I didn't explode. Instead, I said quietly, "Are you done, Dad? Or is there more you want to say in front of everyone?" The question was gentle. But something in my tone made people lean forward. Like they realized something was about to happen. My father's face tightened. He laughed, but it sounded forced. "I'm just telling the truth," he said. "Then let's talk about truth," I replied. I stood up slowly. The room had gone very quiet. My father tried one more thing. He claimed I'd never supported the family. That everything I'd accomplished had been because of his help, his connections, his name. Several guests actually nodded along. This narrative had been repeated so many times that people had started believing it. It had become the story of who I was. But it wasn't the story of who I actually was. "Let's talk about support," I said, my voice steady. I pulled out my phone. The room went absolutely silent. I didn't argue. I didn't get emotional. I just thanked everyone for being there and said this conversation was long overdue. My tone was calm. Controlled. And there was something in the way I was speaking that suggested I'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. "I want to show you something," I said, pulling up my banking app. "Something about what support actually looks like." My father's face went pale. I showed the room a series of bank statements. Payments made over years. Consistent. Significant. Monthly transfers from my account. These payments weren't to me, I explained. They were to cover debts connected to Dad's business. Operational costs he couldn't cover. Loans he couldn't pay. Problems he couldn't solve. I looked at my father. These payments are in your name on the receiving end, Dad. Which means you know exactly where this money came from. The room was completely still now. My sibling looked stunned. Like they were seeing something about our father they'd never noticed before. I took a different kind of job, I continued. Something with less visibility. Something that paid enough to cover these payments quietly, without drawing attention. Without embarrassing you. My father tried to laugh it off. That's exaggerated. I don't remember asking for. Then maybe you should explain these emails, I said. I showed the room my phone again. Email chains between me and my father, dating back years. In the emails, my father asked for money. Repeatedly. Desperately. With a tone completely different from the confident businessman sitting in front of us. Noah, I need help, one read. The suppliers are demanding payment. Can you cover this? Another, please don't tell anyone. Just help me this once. The emails went on and on. Years of private pleading paired with public criticism. My father's face had gone completely red. He looked like he might stand up and leave. Don't bother, I said, before he could move. Sit down. We're not done. The room was beginning to understand the pattern. The gap between what my father said publicly and what he did privately. He needed me invisible, I said. He needed people to believe I was nothing. A failure. Dead weight. Because if anyone knew what I was actually doing, if anyone understood how much he depended on me financially, his image would be destroyed. My sibling was looking at my father with an expression I'd never seen before. Betrayal, maybe. Or realization. Did you even know where the money came from? I asked my sibling directly. They shook their heads slowly. Dad controlled the narrative, I said. He told everyone I was unsuccessful. That you were the successful one. That I was useless. And everyone believed him. You believed him. Because he's good at telling stories. I pulled up more emails. Private conversations where he talked about his financial desperation. Where he acknowledged my help. Where he admitted he couldn't survive without me. But publicly? I continued. Publicly, he claimed I'd never contributed anything. He used you, I looked at my sibling, as proof. As the counterexample to my failure. Because you made his narrative work. You made me look bad by comparison. Guests started whispering among themselves. The comfortable narrative was cracking. The story they'd been told about who I was didn't match what they were seeing now. But I wasn't finished. I want to show you something else, I said. I pulled up another document. A legal file. This is a document showing that I restructured the family business debt. That I legally prevented the business from collapsing completely. My father actually stood up this time. Like he was going to stop me from continuing. Sit down, I said. My voice wasn't angry. But it was clear. Sit down, and listen to the end of this story. He sat down. What looked like my lack of ambition was actually deliberate, I explained. I took a job that paid enough to cover the business debts. I worked in that job for years while you publicly criticized me for not being ambitious enough. While you told people I was dead weight. I looked at my father. You needed me small. You needed me criticized. Because if people knew how much you depended on me, they'd see through you. The room was silent. Not uncomfortable silence anymore. Understanding silence. I was carrying your weight, I said. And I was doing it while you told everyone I was worthless. That was the deal. And I did it. For years. My sibling tried to defend our father. He's been under a lot of stress. The business. Do you know where the money came from? I asked again, looking directly at them. They shook their head. From me, I said. All of it. Every crisis he couldn't handle. Every problem he couldn't solve. I solved it. Quietly. My sibling looked at my father with a completely different expression now. Like they were seeing someone they didn't recognize. You've both been kept in the dark about what was really happening, I said. You've been told a story that made you feel superior. And that story depended on me being seen as inferior. That's how this worked. I pulled up one more document. This shows that without my intervention, the business would have collapsed 5 years ago. There would have been bankruptcy. There would have been lawsuits. Everything Dad built would have been gone. The room understood what that meant. Everything this family had, everything they were proud of, existed because I'd been quietly saving it. While being publicly destroyed for it. My father tried to stand up again. This is ridiculous. You're making this sound like the truth. I said. Yes. I am. I explained the pattern. Years of public criticism paired with private dependence. He needed me to fail publicly so that my success privately wouldn't matter. You needed me invisible, I said again. The words had power now that everyone understood what they meant. My father's authority in the room was visibly crumbling. People who'd respected him an hour ago were looking at him with disgust. Or pity. Or a combination of both. He tried to explain it away. Said I was exaggerating. Said the business wasn't in as much trouble as I was claiming. But the documents were clear. The emails were clear. The pattern was undeniable. So tell them again, I said calmly. Tell everyone here who's dead weight. He said nothing. The silence that followed was complete. Guests started confronting my father quietly, asking why he would treat his son like this. Why he would publicly destroy someone he privately depended on. Why he would build his entire identity on lying. My father's face had gone grey. He looked smaller somehow. Like the room had shifted and he'd become less instead of more. I'm done, I said. I meant it. I'm stepping away, I announced to the room. No more financial support. No more covering debts. No more working a job I don't want so that someone can publicly humiliate me while privately depending on me. I looked directly at my father. Let's see how the business runs without me. Let's see how well your narrative holds up when you have to actually be responsible for your own life. The weight I'd been carrying, I could feel it lifting off my shoulders in that moment. Weeks passed. The business started struggling almost immediately. Without my quiet financial support, problems emerged that my father couldn't solve alone. He was forced to admit publicly what he'd been admitting privately to me for years. That he needed help. That he wasn't infallible. That his narrative about himself was built on lies. Relationships shifted around him. People who'd respected him started keeping their distance. Not dramatically. Just noticeably. Like they'd realized something fundamental about his character. My sibling came to see me privately. They wanted to know everything. They wanted to understand how long this had been happening. How much I'd given up. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" they asked. "Because he asked me not to," I said. And I respected him then. I thought family meant protecting each other, even from shame. I received a message from my father asking for an apology meeting. Asking me to hear him out. Asking me to understand his perspective. I read the message sitting in my apartment. In a life I was finally building for myself. In a job I actually wanted. In a place where I could breathe without carrying someone else's weight. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I started building something I'd always wanted to build. A business. A career. A life that was actually mine. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. My ambitions first. My future first. Months later, my father's business did collapse. Not because of me, but because without me covering the problems, everything came apart. He had to rebuild from nothing. And while that was happening, I was building something real. Something that was mine. People sometimes asked me if I felt bad about what happened to my father. If I wished I'd continued supporting him. No, I said. Because carrying someone else's weight doesn't help them. It just teaches them they don't have to carry their own. The greatest gift I could have given him was letting him feel the consequences of his own actions. I held my own. I stood on my own ground. I refused to be the invisible force holding up someone else's life while being called dead weight. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight. And everything else finally was. My father had called me dead weight in front of everyone. But what he meant was that I was essential. That he couldn't function without me. That my quiet sacrifice was the only thing keeping his narrative alive. And when I stopped making that sacrifice, when I stopped being invisible, everything changed. He finally had to carry his own weight. And I finally got to live my own life. That was the real ending. Not revenge. Not destruction. Just the simple act of stepping away and letting everyone see what was actually true. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop being useful to someone who's using you. I stopped. And I finally became free. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would love to see you in the next one.